Okay, so welcome to Red Clean, and this is another question that we posted, yesterday on the Telegram group, and there were two images in this particular question, and I just asked the likely diagnosis for this particular answer as an answer to this question, and there were no options. Okay, so just look at this image, and the first thing that you see in this particular image, it's important to describe the findings, then come down to certain DDs, and then come down to diagnosis rather than jumping the diagnosis. That is the right approach. Okay, that follow the sequence of the things. So if you look at this image and quickly look at the findings that we see here, so we see bilateral involvement first of all. So we see okay, bilateral involvement that is there. Okay, and if you see the lesions characteristically, what type of lesions these are, so it appears to be, if you look at the size of this lesion, size of lesion appears to be more than 3 centimeters. So I should call this lesion to be a mass rather than nodule. Okay, and if this it could be a nodule or mass, we have to take the exact size that appears to be around 3 centimeter or maybe more. So it appears looks more like a mass, but it could be a nodule also. We have to take the size for that. Okay, so we are dealing with a mass on the right side, or probably nodule or mass on the left side. Now what you see is the component of cavitation in this particular mass. So it's a cavitatory mass in the right side, and if you see the volume of this particular right lung field, it's a little bit reduced in comparison to left. Okay, and if you see that in the periphery of this mass that is cavitated, you see that there are there are connections or there are bands that are going and associated attaching to the pleura. Okay, so these are tags or whatever it is, or they are basically speculations, okay, that are there. So it's a well-defined mass with speculations and tags that are interconnecting it with the pleura. So there are, and the location of the mass, if you see that the trachea is there, so it's predominantly an upper lobar involvement, probably bilateral upper lobar involvement is there. And since I only have a snapshot of this particular scan, I do not have a complete scan, so the mass nodules or the masses could be multiple. Okay, two of them I am seeing just now. So it's a mass that is speculated in the periphery with volume loss, little bit volume loss is there. There's and the mass appears to be relatively well defined. But the important thing is that the wall of this cavitating mass is thick. It's a thick wall. Okay, and also it's irregular. So the features, these features, that thick wall, irregular speculations, okay, and cavitations. So these, basically these features that I just wrote, these three features, they go towards particular specific cause for a cavity. They point to a cause for this cavity, and that if I have only this image, I would want this patient, to get a ruled out of malignancy, because this particular cavity appeared to be malignant according to me, and so I want to rule out malignancy in this particular thing. So so these were the findings from this particular CT image only, but with this we should discuss that if we encounter a cavity in a particular area of lung, how do we approach that cavity. Okay, that is important to understand, and that becomes a topic to be considered. So let's discuss that. So whenever you encounter a cavity, okay, there are few things that you have to ask. One thing is the wall thickness of that cavity. Another important point is that surrounding of that cavity. You have to look at the surrounding of that cavity. That is important. Third important thing that you need to know is whether there are any solid mural components, whether they are present or absent, and if present, what is their status post enhancement. This means that there should be a contrast enhanced CT scan. Okay, post enhancement, what is the status, whether they enhance or they do not enhance. And fourth important thing is that whether the whether there are speculations present or absent, whether there is a rim enhancement, whether there is an irregular wall or not. So remember this thing, wall thickness. We know that cavity, what is the difference between cavity versus cyst? That is also important. Both of these structures, they have air. The only difference between them is the wall thickness. So it is more than 3 mm in cavity, and it is less than 3 mm in cyst. So wall thickness, if it is around 4 to 7 mm, remember this thing, this points to a infective cause. If it is 16 to 24 mm, it points towards, it's a thick walled cavity, it points towards a malignant cause. What we want to divide the cause of cavities infective and non-infective, and among the non-infective, if we have a thick walled cavity, it suggests malignancy. Okay, now if you ask me what is a what is there between 7 to 16 mm, what is there, what happened to this particular size, so it's a dicey situation. So I would say it is indeterminate. It could be malignant or it could be uh, infective. You have to look at other features also. Now if you see the surrounding of cavity, let's say this is a cavity, this is a cavity, the surrounding of the cavity should, if it contains multiple nodules or they contain areas of consolidation, patchy areas of consolidation surrounding it, associated with it also, then if surrounding of cavity you have centrilobular nodules or consolidations, you have to look for them. If you have these present, then they point towards infective cause. If you have, they point toward infective cause. In malignancy, you generally do not have consolidation and centrilobular nodules surrounding the cavity. If you have solid mural components present, now the solid mural component can be present in both infective and non-infective. The important point would be that in infective, they will be non-enhancing, whereas in case of malignancy, they will be enhancing. Speculations is a characteristic feature of malignancy. Remember this thing, at the periphery of the nodule or the mass. Rim enhancement is shown by infective pathologies. And irregular wall, if the wall is irregular, it suggests malignancy. So these are the features that you have to look at a particular cavitating mass or a nodule. Whenever you encounter these features, you have to look for to basically come down to or narrow down your DDs, whether it is infective or it's a non-infective. Okay, because when we look at the DDs for a cavitating, or because let's look at the DDs for multiple cavitating nodules or say masses. What are the DDs for them? Okay, because that is what we are dealing with in the question as well. What are the DDs? Now DDs could be definitely infective or they could be non-infective. Okay, if we want to look at the infective cause example, it could be simply a cavitatory consolidation. And what can be the cause of cavitatory consolidation? Example is your tuberculosis, can simply cause it. Okay, then what else? Fungal infection. Fungal infection can cause this. Angioinvasive fungal infection like mucor, or you have aspergillosis. Then you have other than infective causes also, we can have lung abscess which can lead to cavitation. Okay, that is one thing. Other than this, patient can have, if you have multiple cavitating nodules in the periphery, these could be septic emboli as well. Okay, so these are the infective causes. Among the non-infective causes, it is likely to be a malignancy. It could be a malignancy, and we just wrote down the features that point towards a malignant cavity. Okay, the irregular speculated wall, solid enhancing component is there, and thick wall is there. Okay, speculations are there. Now other non-infective causes could be that it could be a rheumatoid, it could be a rheumatoid nodule. Now these rheumatoid nodules, which they are also associated with subcutaneous rheumatoid nodules, they are basically necrobiotic nodules. So they have central necrosis, necrobiotic in nature. So they have central necrosis. You can also see a patient of rheumatoid arthritis characteristically having a nodule in his lung that is and that is not producing symptoms. And these nodules characteristically are basically fleeting or changing their positions. Okay, so we have necrobiotic nodules in case of rheumatoid arthritis as well, but these are characteristically asymptomatic and they are at the periphery. So they are the periphery. They can be single or multiple, and characteristically they are associated with whenever the patient have subcutaneous rheumatoid nodules also, we have you can see these rheumatoid nodules to be developing in the lungs also. Okay, another thing it could be simply what, mucinous adenocarcinoma lung, or basically what I just wrote is this malignancy only. Another important point is that what is the diagnosis of the question that we are dealing with is your that it is your Wegener's, and Wegener's is basically the earlier name. Now it is known by the name of granulomatosis with polyangiitis. Okay, this is the new name. Okay, so these, and one thing that I forgot is your metastasis. Mets can also be cavitating. Okay, so these are the typical causes that you see multiple cavitating nodules. Now I want to write few points about each one of them, so that that points to a particular DD. Okay, those points, whenever you encounter, you will see that you will not narrow down your differentials. See, if it's an infective cause, what infective causes generally will have a history of fever and constitutional symptoms like rigors and chills. So this is something that will be there in the history. And infective history, either it could be acute or it could be chronic or subacute. Like example, tuberculosis, if you have, patient might be having a low grade fever with night sweats and all those things, where typical clinical features for TB might be there. So TB might be acute also, with reactivation of a chronic TB, or it could be subacute to chronic picture might be there in the tuberculosis. Okay, but cavitary consolidation is it's a part of active tuberculosis. So patient will have uh, a recent basically deterioration of the clinical condition, although patient might be having a chronic history of fever, a low grade fever that would have been there. Okay, so that is the clinical history that you have, and always look for other signs and stigmas of tuberculosis whenever you encounter cavitary consolidation, especially in your developing countries where the infective causes are more common. Then in fungal infection, you will also have a history of immunocompromised state. Patient might be diabetic on steroids or immunosuppressants. Now lung abscess will have an imaging finding that is known as air fluid level, that will be there in lung abscess, and patient will be really septic. Patient's TLC count will be way high. Patient will be having a high grade fever on 104, 103, and patient will be highly septic. That would be there. In septic emboli, you will have another infective focus there in the body. Okay, and this patient will be having infected. Let's say patient had osteomyelitis in your let's say femoral osteomyelitis is there, and the patient developed dyspnea that is acute in onset. And so this, and you see the image, and on image you will see what that on image you will see that, like, so these are the lungs, okay, of this patient. So what you will see peripheral nodules are peripheral, and these multiple nodules are cavitating. And important thing is that since the nodules, these emboli, or these are septic emboli, so they basically, the focus of infective focus has traveled through what hematogenous spread, and it has lodged itself into what lung parenchyma. So typically what you will see multiple peripheral cavitating nodules that are there, and these nodules would be what angiocentric. They will be angiocentric, they will be surrounding the vessel because they have come from the vessel. So one important point about septic emboli is that they will have a feeding vessel sign positive. Now what is feeding vessel sign positive? What is feeding vessel sign? This sign you must have, if you reported CT chest, then definitely you must have known this sign, feeding vessel sign positive, that if you have some pathology and there is a vessel that is going on, okay, that is basically emanating from this particular pathology, this suggests that the basically the spread of this pathology happened due to hematogenous spread, hematogenous route. And that is why feeding vessel sign is positive not only in your septic emboli, it is also present in your metastasis, because they also can get what transmitted, or they also get spread, disseminated by what your blood or hematogenous spread. So that is why septic emboli and mets both will have this. The clinical history will be a differentiating factor whether it's a septic emboli or metastasis. And cavitating mets, you see, whenever you see a cavitating mets, you should always look for certain types of malignancy. What are those? Those are your squamous cell carcinoma can have cavitating mets characteristically. Okay, you can have them. Squamous cell carcinoma has cavitating mets. Another important point, so these were the infective causes. Now in malignancy, you will definitely have a lymphadenopathy and other features that suggest malignancy with a weight loss, chronic or subacute to chronic history with sudden deterioration, like that. and you will have other signs of malignancies as well. And then rheumatoid nodules, you will always be patient with either will known case of rheumatoid arthritis, okay, something like that. Now in Wegener's, what important thing that you will encounter, we are dealing with Wegener's, so just discuss Wegener's in detail. See, in Wegener's, what exactly Wegener's is? So Wegener's is basically a chronic granulomatous disease, okay, with necrotizing vasculitis, and that is why it is characterized under a category known as ANCA positive vasculitis. And along with Wegener's, there are two other entities, that is a microscopic polyangiitis and there is your Churg-Strauss vasculitis. Okay, these also present with similar features. Okay, okay. So in Wegener's, this is a scenario, and typically involvement is of 50 years of age, or this is the mean age that patient has, but definitely you'll have patients with a middle age, okay, that are there. Another important point is that the clinical triad that commonly it presents with, okay, what is a clinical triad that commonly present with? So there are three important organs that are involved. One is your upper respiratory tract involvement, okay, that will be there in all patients. So all patients will be dealing with URT involvement, that will be in the form of whether it's a sinusitis, whether it is your other than sinusitis, it could be a nasal ulcer simply, whether it could be otitis, or patient can present with epistaxis. So it will be like this, or it could be a deformity, nasal deformity. So upper respiratory tract involvement is there. Second involvement is your lungs, that is involved in 90% cases, with one feature that I have already told you is your multiple cavitating nodules or masses. And this cavitation is important. This cavitation is one thing that differentiate it from these two entity. Okay, these two entity can also have multiple nodules. They are scattered in the multifocal nodules in bilateral lung fields. But the cavitation feature is one thing that is very, very exclusive to rule out Wegener's, because if cavitation is not there, then Wegener's is less likely possibility. Okay, although non-cavitating nodules also there, because typically why cavitation happens? Cavitation happens because the nodules become so large that they basically grow out of their, their so the center of this nodule becomes ischemic, because the vessel, or the supply of the blood is from the periphery. So they typically what, the necrosis starts in the center when the nodule becomes large. So if you have a more than 2 centimeter nodule, or you have a large mass, it's likely to be cavitated in Wegener's. So lungs is involved in 90% of the cases. One imaging feature I have just told, other imaging feature I'm going to tell. Third important organ that is involved is your kidneys, and these are involved in 80% of the cases. But remember this thing, it's not that on presentation all three are involved. Okay, patient, generally at time of presentation, kidney involvement or the renal involvement is not there. It develops later in the stage. 40% of the patients present with renal involvement. Okay, but most of these patients, they develop at the later stage renal involvement. And what is the renal involvement that we see? We see glomerulonephritis. So the patient will present with microhematuria. And fourth important thing that you have to remember, that if you have a biopsy diagnosis of Wegener's, okay, so out of, if you have 2 of these 4 features positive at least, then diagnosis of Wegener's granulomatous is likely. So this was a criteria to diagnose it. Okay, criteria to diagnose Wegener's. Okay, now another important point is that regarding this, and that is your that once we discuss Wegener's, what is the next imaging finding in lung involvement? So we discussed about multiple cavitating nodules, and masses. Next important finding, it could be, it is your GGOs or consolidation. GGOs or consolidation. Now remember this thing, Wegener's can present with GGOs and consolidation only. Also, that isolated GGOs or isolated consolidation can be a presentation in Wegener's also. So you might not see multiple cavitating nodules, and you will see only this. But remember this thing, whenever you will have GG or consolidation as a predominant finding on the lungs, okay, you will definitely not think of Wegener's unless you have multiple cavitating nodules also there. So if you have isolated GGOs or consolidation, you will first rule out what infective etiology. So patient is obviously, started on antibiotics and patient does not respond on antibiotics. Okay, and then, just, by ruling out one by one, you start to think of Wagner's. But definitely when the patient has, GGOs or consolidation, because these are typically also associated with an acute history, so they mimics, Wagner's associated GGOs and consolidation. They basically what they are started on the antibiotics first, and there is a poor antibiotic response, and that is when the clinicians start to think of Wagner's as one etiology. But obviously the bacterial or etiology is kept at the first in the order of priorities, and they typically are seen in 50% of the cases. So remembering this particular pattern is also important, because Wagner's can pretend, you know can present like this. Another particular disease that presents like this, that that typically presents with a consolidation, patchy areas of consolidation in the periphery, okay, and in subpleural areas, is your organizing pneumonia or COP or cryptogenic organizing pneumonia. In this particular pattern also, the patient, they have the findings are typically of bacterial pneumonia or something like that. But when the patient started on antibiotic therapy, patient does not improve, and that is where you start to look at the other DDs. So Wagner's and organizing pneumonia are the two DDs, in which the patient started, patient had consolidation and GGOs, patient started on antibiotics and a poor response. So 50% of the cases they will have this finding as well. Another important finding that it could be is that, that it's a necrotizing vasculitis, and Wagner's granulomatosis is also a cause of pulmonary renal syndrome. Pulmonary renal syndrome. And since it involves, what kind of vessels involves, it involves small to medium vessels, small to medium vessels. So that is why the patient can present with what, pulmonary alveolar hemorrhage. Alveolar hemorrhage, basically due to what, vasculitis, small vessel vasculitis. So alveoli of this patient will, due to rupture of the vessels, can have what, basically red blood cells flooded in the alveoli, and they will appear like either GGO or consolidation. So this patient will be having acute onset, deterioration, the symptoms, pulmonary symptoms, with GGOs and consolidation, patchy areas of GGOs with subpleural sparing characteristically, and patient might be having what, dropping hemoglobin. Then you should suspect that patient is bleeding in the alveoli, and that is what is a pulmonary alveolar hemorrhage that it can cause, is one thing that Wagner's causes. So these are the, and I have discussed about the basically the cavitating nodules in this particular image, that this is a characteristic Wagner's cavitating nodule, although it has some features that points towards malignancy as one cause also, because it has to be ruled out that, these tags, they appear like speculations, although they are also seen in Wagner's. Wagner's nodule, cavitating nodule, characteristically has these kind of tags and speculations that is not there in cavitating nodules of other diseases. But definitely I would, just to be cautious, you should rule out malignancy in this particular case, because malignancy is one complication of one complication that happens in your cavitating nodules due to Wagner's. So many cavitating nodules of the Wagner's, they can turn down into a malignant cavity as well. That's why it is important to rule out malignancy such suspicious nodules. Okay, it appears to be malignant. Had it been not, had there not been any other image like this that is shown, in this particular image, it is classically seen. You can see that maxillary sinusitis is there, bilateral. You see soft tissue thickening in its, in its wall. Then you see ethmoid sinuses getting affected, frontal sinuses getting affected, and you see nasal cavities that is basically stuffed with soft tissue thickening. So it's NCCT PNS. We do not have any contrast here, okay, to look at a probable pathology, but definitely it's a sinusitis. So it's a pansinusitis. So since these, this particular upper respiratory tract involvement in association with your this multiple cavitating nodules, it goes in favor of Wagner's definitely. But even if it's a cavity that is there associated with Wagner's, I would like to rule out malignancy in this, because the features of this particular nodule, they are a little bit suspicious. Okay, so that is about Wagner's. Now what are other things, other findings other than lung involvement? What else Wagner's involved other than URT involvement and lung involvement? So what other part of respiratory tract it can involve? So remember this thing, that Wagner's can also involve your airway, and in airway it can involve your tracheobronchial tree, tracheobronchial tree can involve. And in tracheobronchial tree, remember this thing, that this is your trachea. So in trachea you have cartilage, this part is your cartilaginous, that this U-shaped part. And in the in the posterior area you have a tracheal membrane that is there, that is non-cartilaginous part. Remember this thing, Wegener's can cause what? Your circumferential what? Thickening of this wall. Now remember this thing, this thickening can be caused by what? This thickening can be caused by other diseases also. Remember this thing. Now this circumferential thickening could be either smooth. Now this thickening is nothing but your granulomatous inflammation. This thickening could be smooth and it could be nodular as well. So just like nodule is it's important, but important point is that this circumferential thickening, it could be smooth or nodular, that is okay. But important thing that this particular posterior tracheal membrane that you are seeing, I should mark it with like yellow, which you are seeing right now, this this involvement of this involvement of this is a rule in Wegener's granulomatosis, and that is a differentiating feature from other diseases. Well, discuss in tracheal disorders, that multiple disorders will discuss, and in airway, if Wegener's can affect this circumferential smooth nodular thing, that can be there. But remember this thing, this posterior tracheal membrane is not spared by Wegener's, and it is spared by other disorders, like your relapsing polychondritis is one thing, then your tracheosteobronchopathica is there. Okay, that spares this particular posterior, and amyloidosis also spares this. So there are diseases that spares this. So if you see a diffuse involvement, circumferential involvement involving this part also, you should always think of Wegener's as one cause. Okay, so airway involvement is there in Wegener's. Now typically it causes intrathoracic involvement is there, that you have what? Subglottic involvement is there below the blockage, below the glottis. Subglottis involvement is there in Wegener's. Remember this thing. Okay, it can involve your primary bronchi as well. Okay, remember this thing. So primary bronchi can also be involved. So patient might have stenosis, developing due to this wall thickening. Okay, and ultimately, primary bronchi may also involved. So it would be tracheal involvement below the glottis. So it will be around, intrathoracic involvement. So primary, they can be involved. So you might see stenosis here at this point, and this stenosis can lead to what? It can lead to infection developing, and these infection can go into and developing bronchiectasis as well. So basically airway involvement can be seen. Now can you answer me one thing, that can pleural involvement will be there? So definitely pleural involvement can also be there in the form of effusion. We can have effusion in Wegener's, but remember this thing, pleural thickening. Okay, pneumothorax. Okay, these are the findings that you should always suspect when a malignancy might be developing in this particular part, or nodularity if you see. Okay, so it might be infection or malignancy that is there, because it likely to cause effusion only. Another thing is that lymphadenopathy that is there. Can it cause lymphadenopathy? So lymphadenopathy it can cause, but it's rare. It definitely can cause. Nothing is 100% obviously, but yeah, it is rare. Okay, look for other causes also, like cavitating nodules. There are other causes also which can have lymphadenopathy. So these are the classical features. Remember this, in Wegener's is your multi-system involvement is there, and that is why, since in Wegener's is a multi-system, so any organ can get affected. But this is the classical triad of three areas. URT, lung, and your renal involvement is there. Brain can get affected, heart can get affected. Okay, so there are multi-system involvement is there, and one antibody that you have to remember about this is your C-ANCA, that is there in your 90% cases of Wegener's. So if it is given in question, think of Wegener's. But remember this thing, if it is negative also, even then patient can have Wegener's, because there are 10% still which are C-ANCA negative. Okay, so if you suspect Wegener's, this is the first thing that you have to do, that you have to go for an ANCA positivity, whether it's present, then it will, corroborate your findings. Okay, so that was about the Wegener's granulomatosis, and this, diagnosis that we, asked for in the question is Wegener's granulomatosis, but I would like to rule out malignant etiology of this particular, mass. Now, next question that we have is this particular question, and I'll just briefly discuss this. Okay, because I'm going to put another question in the future also, which will be, dealing with the detail of these particular sort of diseases. Now, if you look at closely at this particular CT scan, what you can clearly see is, again, you have to describe the findings first. So you see multiple cystic lesions. Okay, that is one thing that you see in the lung fields. What I could see is that multiple cystic lesions are there. And I see these cystic lesions multiple, they are bilaterally, and they are nearly diffuse involvement is there. Diffusely present is there, and they're bilateral. So there are multiple cystic lesions. Okay, now if you see the walls of these lesions, so they have a, do they have wall present or not? So yes, they have wall, and this wall appears to be, cystic wall is typically less than 3 mm, so it looks like less than 3 mm or 3 mm, so it looks like cystic, multiple cysts are there. Okay, now important thing is that other than cyst, I could see, some areas of fibrosis are also there, like interlobar septal thickening is also there. See, there are reticulation areas of reticulation are also there, few areas of reticulations are also there, and by and large, multiple cystic lesions are there. Okay, then if you see closely, you can see this trachea, this is your trachea, and if you see the trachea is little bit enlarged, and trachea is also irregular. You can see the border of the trachea, it's irregular, it's like this wavy pattern, and it's enlarged also. If you look at the AP diameter of this trachea, it's a little bit large. Okay, and that's why I should call it to be tracheomegaly. So there's a tracheomegaly present here. And what is the criteria of tracheomegaly on CT? So on CT scan, basically AP diameter should be more than 3 centimeter. But remember this thing, this AP diameter is what it is, basically measured 2 centimeter above the aortic arch. So it is, the section has to be 2 centimeter above the aortic arch. Only there you measure AP diameter of trachea, and it has to come down more than 3 centimeter to call it to be tracheomegaly. So you have multiple cystic lesions that are there. Okay, but importantly, what you have to focus on, that I'm going to tell now. So whenever you see a cyst, multiple cystic lesions in lung, remember this thing, that you have to ask one question to yourself. One is that whether there are, pseudo cavities, or whether they are primary cystic lesion. Now what is it? Let's discuss. Okay, see, cyst could be, anything. Cyst could be anything that has a wall. Okay, it has a wall. Now a cyst could be, let's say, even if a patient has emphysematous changes, they can also appear like a cyst. If patient has pneumatocele, they can also appear like cyst. If patient has bronchiectatic cavities, they can also appear like cyst. Patient has a thin walled cavity, they can also appear like cyst. Okay, if patient has a bulla, that can also present like a cyst. Okay, now important point is that all these, they are presenting like a cystic lesion, because the definition of a cystic lesion is that something that is circumscribed, that is air containing, and that has a thin wall. That is what the cyst is. Now if you have a thin wall and you have a circumscribed lesion, even emphysematous changes, they are described typically to be having no wall. Okay, they do not have wall. Characteristically, the wall is absent in emphysematous changes, but they can have slightly thin wall, so they can look like a cyst also. Okay, and if emphysematous changes are surrounded by fibrosis, a patch of fibrosis, then definitely the wall becomes slightly thick, so it can appear like a cyst. Similarly, pneumatocyst can present like a cyst, a bronchiectatic cavity can present like a cyst, thin walled cavity can present like a cyst, and a bulla can present like a cyst. So what I could see that there are multiple cystic lesions. Now I want to know whether it's a whether what kind of cyst it is. That is one thing that I want to know. Another possibility is that so all these the particular all these findings like emphysematous changes, pneumatocyte, bronchiectatic cavity, they are known commonly by the name of pseudocavities. Why? Because they are not cavities per se, or they are not or pseudocavities or pseudocyst basically. Why? Because they are not cyst primarily. They are cystic in nature due to secondary to some other pathology. Why? Emphysematous changes happens due to destruction of your alveoli, which some and multiple air spaces uniting to form a cyst. So it was not a cyst per se, rather it was what? It's a destruction of alveoli that is ultimately presenting as a cyst. Similarly, pneumatocyte is the same. It is secondary to some other pathology. Now bronchiectasis can give rise to cyst, that your bronchi are basically enlarging to that extent, now they appear like a cyst. Similarly, you might be having a bulla that will have a slightly thicker wall, so it can present like a cyst. But there are certain diseases that are primarily cystic in nature. They do not have any other pathology. They are cystic per se. They are cystic from the beginning. Example, lymphangioliomyomatosis. Example, pulmonary Langerhans cell histiocytosis. Another example is your, in this scenario would be your, let's say your LIP. You know, these are some of the disorders that are cystic from the, and that's why these are characterized under what? Primary cystic disease of lung or diffuse cystic disease of lung. Okay, so they are primary cystic and these are typically rare. So we have to differentiate whether the cyst is due to these causes, or the cysts are there due to, from the beginning they are cyst, they are not secondary to something. So if you look closely, so there are differentiating points and there are other findings. So that is why, there are so many overlapping features in chest radiology that you have to look for the clinical history and other findings to localize or to rule out other causes and finally come down to a narrow differential diagnosis, list or differential diagnosis. That is why emphysematous changes, if you have a history of, patient having, acute exacerbation, multiple acute exacerbations, or patient taking inhalers and all those, patient diagnosed with COPD, then you will always think of emphysematous changes, patient, having acute history, patient is septic with a, high fever and all that, and staph pneumonia like picture, so you will think of pneumatococcus. Similarly, if the patient is having, long history of, low grade fever, and you can think of bronchiectatic cavities. Other thing that in bronchiectatic cavity would be that it will be continuous with the airway. These cavity would be continuous with the airway. Okay, and in walled cavity or bulla, again these are emphysematous changes only. So there are, you have to look for other findings to localize whether the cyst is cystic primarily or it is secondary to something. So in this particular, case that is shown here, if you see closely and you look closely at this point, I have to zoom it for you, to appreciate the findings. If you look at the cyst, all these cysts, you will see one thing common in them, that every cyst, look at this cyst, this cyst, this cyst, this cyst, every cyst, if you see, in its wall or surrounding, near the wall, there is a vessel. See, this is the vessel. This is the vessel. Now, in this particular, this is the vessel. This is the vessel here. So every cyst is having what? Basically it is near a particular vessel. So every cyst has a vessel near it. Okay. And if you remember the secondary pulmonary lobule, which is like this. So in the center of secondary pulmonary nodule, you have a central pulmonary branch of central pulmonary artery, and you have a bronchiole here. These are the two structures that are there in the center of a secondary pulmonary lobule. So if I say that, let's say, and if you remember the signet ring sign, if you remember, So what exactly it is? It is seen in bronchiectasis, in which what you see a vessel and you see a bronchi. So the bronchi gets enlarged to that extent it becomes larger than. So it is never larger than the vessel, but it will become larger than the vessel. And how much larger? So it will become nearly 1.5 times of the vessel, and that is what we call the signet ring sign to be positive. So what you are seeing here is what signet ring sign positive, and why it is important. So what is the nature of these cavities? What you are seeing, or cavities or cyst, for that matter? These cavities are nothing but your bronchiectatic cavities. And how I am able to tell that these are bronchiectatic cavities? That one thing is that the signet ring sign is positive here. Another important point is that if you see the secondary pulmonary lobule also, so by logic, if the bronchi in the center will enlarge, it will be near the vessel. This suggests that these are centrilobular bronchiectatic cavities. These are basically nothing but cystic type of bronchiectasis, cystic bronchiectasis that is there, that we are dealing with. So you have cystic bronchiectasis, and another finding that we saw is your see this is the enlarged AP diameter of trachea is enlarged. It appears more than 3 centimeter. So I would call it to be tracheomegaly is also there. Tracheomegaly is also there. Now I have to write these findings. So I have tracheomegaly. I have tracheomegaly, and I have cystic bronchiectasis. Okay, these are the two findings that I have, and these two findings and this cystic bronchiectasis, if you look at, it's typically parahilar. More and more cysts are towards perihilar, so I should call it to be now what type of cystic bronchiectasis? It is characteristically central bronchiectasis. So central cystic bronchiectasis with tracheomegaly, this syndrome that you remember always with these two features is your what? Mounier-Kuhn syndrome. Now, what exactly in this syndrome? This syndrome can present even in your middle age or in your childhood age, in which the patient characteristically has what? It has lost its elastic tissue fibers and muscle in the airway, and that is why these airways are prone to infection. So they develop infection, and ultimately they are also infection bronch obstruction cycle that ultimately develops into cystic bronchiectasis. And later, due to infection, patients even in the airway there is a loss of cartilage also, that is secondary. So this is a typical cystic bronchiectasis, central in origin, and tracheomegaly, tracheobronchomegaly to be precise. If you see these two findings together, remember of this syndrome, Mounier-Kuhn syndrome. Okay, now we'll discuss bronchiectasis in detail in a separate video that will be there as a part of regular lectures. But definitely this syndrome you should keep in mind, and always try to look at the cyst. Whenever you look at the cyst, try to find out the cause of that cyst. That is going to be important. So thanks a lot.